The Alchemy Material Library add-on can be used to paint any two Blender Render or Cycles materials, as well as special particle materials and Alchemy effect materials. Any material that you can get into this library can be used to paint with. Now, when we say material painting with Alchemy, we don't just mean painting a texture image onto some material. What we mean is literally painting with all of the features of that material, so all of its surface properties, displacement properties, etc. So it works for both Blender Render and Cycles. And the library I have open right now, if I click my Alchemy Options button, is the Alchemy Base Pack, which, as you can see, consists of 75 Cycles materials and 0 Blender Render. But if I click on this open source pack, which you can download free at blendersensei.com, you can actually get it on the Alchemy documentation page by clicking the link over to the left here. If I click on this library, you see there are 50 Blender Render materials and 25 Cycles materials, which the Alchemy Material Library add-on will automatically separate Blender Render and Cycles materials for you within a specific library so that you only see the materials that are available to you depending on what render engine you're in. So if I go ahead and switch this to Blender Render, we'll see the available materials in this open source pack here change to the Blender Render materials, which we can use. And I'll go ahead and close up my library selection and options button there because I don't need it right now. And I'm going to go ahead and double right click here and add a monkey head and tap W a few times if you're using Sensei Format, which adds subsurface, modifier, and smoothing. And so to paint, all we need is a base material on the object. For instance, this bone here, I could press use, and that adds that material to this object. So if I were to press Shift Z here in Blender Render, you can see this sweet procedurally generated bone material, which looks really cool. So if we want to paint, all we then do is select another material and press this paintbrush icon. Now notice that the paintbrush icon here is grayed out, and this is really useful because it lets you know that you're not selected on a material or an option that will let you paint. So for instance, we just added this bone material to this Suzanne head here. So obviously we can't paint the same material onto the material. So as soon as we select a different material, you'll see this light up and it means you can paint with that. So I'm going to select this glass building material to kind of show you what it really means to actually paint with all the surface properties of the materials. And I'm going to press paint. This immediately sends me into whatever mode I need to be in to paint, which depending on the type of material you're using, like say you're using an Alchemy particle material or an Alchemy effect material, you might be taken to weight paint mode or something. But the point is you don't have to know which mode you need to be in. You're automatically transferred. Everything's automatically set up and adjusted so you can just instantly begin painting. And as you can see here, I'm able to paint this glass building material directly onto this bone material here, which looks really cool even in the live 3D view. But if we were to press Shift Z to get a render preview, we can get an idea what the final render would look like here. Notice as I paint this material on, which the viewport's wigging out a little bit, but anyway, notice that where I paint the glass, it's actually transparent through. So like on this big part of Suzanne's eyebrow, you can see straight behind it through the ear. And that's because we're actually painting with all the transparency, reflectivity, displacement, what have you properties of each material. And this works for both Blender Render and Cycles. So I'm going to press Shift Z to stop that render preview. So to finish painting, you can just press Finish Painting here, or if you decided, you know what, I wish I hadn't done that to that material, you can press this X button and that will return everything to normal. But while you're in paint mode, if you want, you can also switch out the material you were painting with any other material. So say instead of this glass, I wanted to use this molten material. All I do is while I'm in paint mode, and you'll know you're in paint mode because you'll see this Finish Painting up here, I just press this again, and that will switch that material out. So if we were to then press Shift Z to get a render preview, we can see this molten lava material now blending with this bone material, which is super cool. Okay, I'm going to press Shift Z to get out of render preview mode. In addition, you'll also see where this normally says use, delete, or save, referring to the materials. While you're in paint mode, you'll get this little menu which will adjust the way that these materials are being blended. So you can change this from add to multiply, and You can see how it's adjusting that effect there. So if you want, you can actually just blend the entire properties of two different materials without painting at all. So if you wanted to paint with a second material and then not lay down any paint strokes and then use this to like just blend those properties, you can, or you can blend them after laying down paint strokes. And this is really the reason why the Alchemy material library is called Alchemy, because it really allows you to transmute all of the actual properties of two materials. Okay, now time for a cycles demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and press File, New, and Reload Startup File here. And I'm going to switch this over to Cycles. And I'm going to double right click here, which in Sensei Format will move your 3D cursor and bring up your Add menu. I'm going to add a monkey. Tap W a few times, S to scale this up, so we've got a nice smooth Suzanne head here. And on my material tab, if I click the options button open, you can see I'm using the Alchemy base pack here, so I'm going to press the library button, which opens up my library and lets me select a material. In addition to Blender Render and Cycles materials, Alchemy brings two special material types to Blender, that is particle materials as well as Alchemy effect materials like Raise AE, which whenever used on an object or multiple objects or a mesh selection will automatically adjust all the settings in Blender to use Blender's new true displacement features. It will also automatically distribute all the needed modifiers and settings to use adaptive subdivision. Basically, it lets you use these awesome new true displacement features within these materials as though the material itself were truly just all you had to add to the object. And then as soon as you do, it just looks amazing whenever you go to render it. We also have effect materials such as fire, fog, and smoke, which are discussed in another video and you can learn more about by clicking the download manual link over here. But anyway, I'm going to click on my reality palettes button, which gives me access to categories. And under rock, and if I just click on this sedimentary rock here, which is a Raise AE material, and I press use, that will add that material to this Suzanne head. And so the instant we add that material, as soon as we go to render it, so we can press Shift Z to get a render preview here, the displacement effects are immediately enacted, as well as the adaptive subdivision and all the settings that need to be activated within Blender to set this up and use it. So we've got this really cool, looks like an old sediment formed Suzanne head that like became calcified at the bottom of an ocean or something, which is really sweet because we've done no UV mapping, no setup work. We just selected the material and press use, which is awesome. But like every other material type within Alchemy, we can also paint with these materials. So what I'm going to do is change this category from rock to liquid. And as you can see here, I don't have a lot of materials in this category. However, we do have the particle material for rain. And yes, this will just make it rain if you use it because you can paint with particles. In Alchemy, you can also just paint where you wanted it to rain. So say you had made some objects and used as clouds, you could literally paint on the clouds where you wanted rain to come out and it would just rain when you press play, which is awesome. But right now I'm going to use this water material to paint onto this Suzanne head. So if I switch this from solid viewport shading to material viewport shading, which Blender's new awesome material viewport shading for cycles can now display procedurally generated cycles materials live in the 3D view. I mean, it's obviously not as good as it's going to look when you do an actual render and when true displacement is literally changing the mesh and stuff, but it's still really useful to adjust materials and figure out how stuff looks. Anyway, so if I want to paint with this material or any other material type, all I do is select the material I want to paint with. I press paint, and then I'll be automatically transferred into whatever mode I need to be in. All the settings will be adjusted so I can just start painting that material onto the object. All right, so I'm going to increase my brush size and just start painting some water onto this Suzanne head. Now, right now, Blender is being very nice and letting these two really complex procedural materials display in the 3D view, but occasionally it is possible that with material painting that the total outcome material becomes so complicated that Blender's 3D viewport is unable to represent it live in the 3D view. It will always be able to show up when you do a render preview or when you go to do an actual render, but it may like get grayed out or turn orange or something. If it does, you can just switch this to solid viewport shading and you can at least know where your paint strokes for that material are going. And then, it will show up properly whenever you render. But right now it's being very nice and letting these materials display, which is good. If using ZeroBrush, you can hold Control, of course, to blur things. That might be default Blender, I don't know. They change that stuff up every now and then. And of course, you can also hold Shift to erase if you have ZeroBrush or Sensei Format ZeroBrush Lite in any paint mode or sculpt mode you're in, which is very convenient. So material painting, for the most part, does happen in vertex paint mode, which means that you're somewhat limited to your resolution of where you can paint things to the actual mesh of the object. You can, of course, increase that resolution if you click on the Modifiers tab and you apply a subsurface modifier. So for instance, here I could bump this up to say 3 and then press Apply here. And so now if I were to like hold Shift and paint through here, or Control to blur or paint or whatever, I've got a bit more resolution on this. Okay, so if I switch this back to the Material tab, we can of course finish painting by pressing this Finish Painting button, which will hop us back into whatever mode we were in before we started painting. In the same way, if you decide you want to switch a material out from the one you're painting with, in the same way you can do that in Blender Render mode, you can do that for cycles as well. So I could press Alt to return my regular material display and shut off the reality palettes there. If I wanted to say switch this water out that I was painting with something else, any of these I could. I just select it and then press the paintbrush icon there. And so now I've switched that water out for cement, which is showing up in the live in the 3D viewport. Obviously it's going to look a lot nicer when we go to render it. But I actually do want water to be there right now, so I'm going to return that and press All and close those up there. So I want to do a render preview of this sedimentary rock with this water painted on it. But before I do that, I'm going to click on this Adjust menu, which this Alchemy Adjust menu, which is right next to the Add a Material to a Library basically button. What this does is it gives you immediate access to the most relevant features of that material type. So if it's a raise material, you have immediate control of the dicing scale, which will basically control the detail of the true displacement material you're using. And as you can see, there's a little note here. It says bigger equals faster render, which if you're using GPU rendering, which is not always quite as stable as CPU rendering, as we can see here, which I am using GPU rendering, you might want to increase this a bit while viewing things in rendered mode, or basically doing a render preview. And the reason for that is just in case your graphics card is not particularly stable, which mine is not super stable with Blender. It's pretty stable. However, it's not a bad idea to increase this value while you are testing things out. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this to 3, which will make it a lot less likely for Blender to crash when I'm doing render previews. And then when I'm ready to render, like for reals, I'll pop that back to 1. And if we go ahead and press Shift Z here, we can see the water painted on to the sedimentary rock, which looks insane because it's using all the actual material properties of the water in the places where water is painted on over that sedimentary rock, which looks incredible. But I think what I would like to do is, rather than having this water reflect back just this generic white background, I'm going to press Shift Z to get out of render preview mode, and I'm going to add an environment sky to my background. So if you have the drag and drop environments add-on from blendersensei.com, you can use this, or if you've got some other way to get backgrounds in there, cool. But if you're interested in this, you can of course get this at blendersensei.com. And the drag and drop environments add-on not only comes with these 12 sky environments, which are basically just a cherry on top. The real purpose of the add-on is to let you use any of the thousands of free panoramic images online, as well as all the different image map types that Blender can use, which you can, use other commercial packs or just download, tons of free images from Google image search. So for instance, I needed a star background in another tutorial I was working on. So I looked up Google image search, a Creative Commons for celestial background, and I found this Milky Way picture, which is freaking awesome. And the add-on just allows you to load up whatever folder you want to have access to of all these environments. And then whenever you need it, just drag and drop it into Blender's background. And the add-on will automatically build all the proper light settings for Blender Render and for cycles, or just one or the other. You can adjust it in the settings to where your scene will be totally lit by that environment. And it also gives you access to a lot of really sweet controls, such as the use dynamic source feature, which one of the drawbacks to using environmental lighting is that if you increase the lighting of your background image too much, like say you need more light in your scene, you can end up blowing out your actual background environment. And this actually doesn't look that bad with this Milky Way one because it's, starts out dark anyway. But you can end up making your clouds and stuff look really bad if you turn this energy up too much. What the use dynamic source lets you do is lets you keep the energy level of your background at a moderate level. But if we were to click this and use this, it creates a sun lamp which has fed into it the environment texture. So what happens is you can use this to direct where you want light to point out to, and it's still using the same color information from the environment, but it lets you increase this value a bunch without blowing out your background. And it also lets you intensify an area where the light's coming from, which helps generate artificial shadows from the lighting of the environment better. So it's a really cool feature. There's a bunch of really cool stuff you can do. Sorry to go on a long plug about the drag and drop environments add-on, but it is really great. I recommend it. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that up. And I actually don't want to use a Milky Way for this. I'm gonna click on one of the skies that the add-on does come with. And let's see, what do we want here? This one will probably be good. All right, cool. Go ahead and close that up. And this little assets library button, this is native to a Sensei Format, which of course Sensei Format is free, and you can click this link over here to the left to check out Sensei Format if you want. However, if you're not using Sensei Format, the drag and drop environments add-on comes with the option to have a little library button here, which will automatically open up a file browser window where normally your animation bar is in default Blender. And so you can just select from your environments and drag them out like that. Okay, so now I'm about ready to do a render preview here. Let's see what this is looking like. I'm gonna press Shift Z. And you can see already the world of difference that sky environment makes on the lighting of this object. I think what I want to do is make the paint in the water a little more frequently. It looks a little splotchy. I mean, I don't even know what I mean by that. What am I even making? I don't know. I guess I'm an artist and I get a feel for stuff and I want to do stuff. So I don't even know by what I'm going for here, I think maybe we're making a Suzanne planet head. I think that's what's happening. So let's press Shift Z to get out of that. And click back on Suzanne head, which takes me back to vertex paint mode. I'm going to increase my brush strength. And I just want this water to be a little more prominent. And of course, the same way in which we can blend Blender render materials when we're painting, we can also blend the cycles materials. So we could switch this from add to say multiply, and then adjust these values, however, to mix these materials in whatever way we decide. Turn that back to add though, back to 0, which is what it was. Which this is really fun to play around with, even without painting at all, just mixing the actual features of two different materials, especially really complex materials, just to see the way that Cycles manages to fuse them together. There's actually a really cool image in the PDF manual for Alchemy, which you can get for free on the page about material painting, where I fuse a corrugated steel material with glass and it looks crazy. It's really cool. Okay, I'm gonna press Shift Z to see what that's doing. All right, that's looking pretty sweet there. I think I'm going to adjust the texture space of this object. So you can do that by pressing this button here. You can actually adjust the texture space, or you can sort of think of it as the material surface of objects. You can do that to multiple objects at once under this adjust menu. If you click this button here, as you can see, we're changing the size of the texture space scale there. You can adjust it on the whole like that, or you can adjust individual values to, stretch up and down or left or right. You can also change the offset of where the material is generating stuff, which is pretty sweet. We'll go ahead and reset that and then increase it all just a little. Okay, I think I want to paint some grass or weeds or something onto this because I think this is becoming Planet Suzanne head. So what I'm going to do is press Finish Painting. And I'm going to press hide, close up all that stuff because I don't need to see it. And I'm going to click on my categories and select grass. And as you can see, all of the materials in this category are particle materials. I'm going to select weeds. Now, of course, I could just add this material to this Suzanne head, and that would put the weeds all over the entire thing. But I don't want to do that. I'd rather paint them on, which I can do. So if I wanted to paint the weeds material, the actual material which composes the weeds and the weed particles, I could just press the paintbrush button icon right now, and that would let me paint the surface of this material as well as the particles all at once wherever they want to go. But what I'd rather do is just paint with the particles that belong to this material. So to do that, I can press down this button, which if you hover your mouse over, it says press this to paint with the particles from a library material only, rather than painting with the particles and its material surface. So we press that, and that lets me just paint with the particles rather than the material surface and particles. Where you can always know a material is a particle material because you'll see this little particle symbol pop up next to the material. And so that same goes for if you create your own particle material and add it to the library, you'll automatically see this little symbol pop up by it. Okay, so let's paint onto this Suzanne head with some weeds. So I'm just going to press the paintbrush button. And this time you'll notice I'm taken to weight paint mode because it's what's required for this particular painting operation. What's cool about painting with particles only is A, you can paint as many particle layers onto an object as you want, and B, you can see them generate live as you paint, which is super sweet. So immediately I know that those weeds are way too tall. So what I'm going to do is press my Alchemy Adjust button. And like I said, this Alchemy Adjust button will give you instant access to the most immediately needed features of that material. So of course, if you wanted to fully adjust this particle, you can always head over to Blender's Particle tab here and adjust the weeds particle. However, this gives us access to however many particle materials we happen to be using, like quick access to like adjust the size of the particle display, the parent, that is, how many particles are being used overall, and then the child display, that is how many children particles will pop up around every actual particle you have, and then how much will actually render. So this Suzanne head's a real small surface, so I'm going to drop the total parent number down to about 50. And just paint these on someplace. Maybe decrease their size just a bit more too. As you'll notice, the distribution of the particles is controlled A, by wherever you paint, and B, how hard you paint. So if I really, paint a lot on somewhere and make it red, it will make the things go bigger. And if I press like Shift X or to decrease the strength, it's going to make the particles shorter and less dense. How about some weed eyebrows? Sweet. And if you want to see more of what the actual population of these particles is going to look like when it's going to render, what you can do is increase this display value to the render value. So for instance, if I were to switch this to 20, which is what it's going to render at, this is going to give me a better idea of how much stuff will actually show up when I go to render. However, you don't want to leave it like that because it will slow down your scene. But still, I can see that's going to be way too tall. So I'm going to drop the size down even more because I want to give the impression of like this is like a planet head. I mean, obviously not to scale, but just a little smaller. And we can press hide here. And when we're done painting, we can just press finish painting here. Okay, that looks pretty sweet. Probably don't want so many weeds where the water is. So let's see, I just have to get those areas real quick. So you can go back to painting whenever you need by just pressing the paintbrush icon. And right now we're only painting with one particle material on this Suzanne head. But if we were painting with multiple, a new little menu will pop up that allows you to select between which particle material you want to adjust here. So let's see, where did I need to get rid of it? Here. Make a mental image of that in my head. So something like that, and over there. How's that looking? And probably put them around like where the ground is, more or less. So holding Shift to erase, which is a nice feature carried over from ZeroBrush. Which, yeah, this particular situation of having to switch back and forth between the material to see where I painted water is a little tricky. I mean, it's not ideal, but I mean, 5 minutes after I get done with this video, I'll realize something I could have done to make this easier on myself. But, you know, that looks pretty cool. However, maybe the planet would be a little less depressing if I also filled it with some clover. So I'm going to click on clover and click the paintbrush button. So if you're not in a paint mode and you've already been painting something, pressing the paintbrush button will take you back to what you were painting on. However, if you want to add another layer, all you do is while you're in the paint mode, or when you're doing particle painting, that is, just select something else and press paint, and that will add a new layer. So as you can see, if I bring this up some here, we now have this menu which will let us select between which particle material we want to paint on. So I know that I've basically set up these weeds to go around where water is, so I need to keep the clover like, you know, similar to where these areas are. And as you can see, that's like way too huge, so I can press my adjust menu and make these a bit smaller, probably decrease the density a lot because once again, this is a really small sized area. Maybe bring my strength down of my weight paint and some clovery stuff in here. So if we wanted to switch between which particle material we're painting with, we can just, of course, click the different menu there, which will manifest if you've got more than one. So now we're, you know, back to painting with weeds, and we're not affecting the clover stuff. We went back on the clover, and we can paint with as many particle materials as you want. So this can be hair-based materials like this, which use objects in groups, or it can be emitter particles, whatever. It doesn't matter. It can be anything. Okay, I'm going to hide that because I'm done with that. And I'm going to press Finish Painting. And so we're starting to have a pretty sweet looking Suzanne planet head here. Real quick before I go, I think what I'll do is paint some fog onto this. So I'm going to press Alt to return my full display of all my materials. And I'm going to come down here and select Fog AE, which of course, whenever you see AE at the end of the name of material, that means Alchemy Effect material. And I'm going to turn off Paint with Particles Only button, so I'll have access to the regular paintbrush icon. And to paint fog onto here, all I have to do is select the object, press the paintbrush button with fog selected. I'll be automatically transferred to whatever mode I need, and everything will be set up for me to do it. And then I just paint on where I want fog to go. Because, lo and behold, a fog came over the waters of the deep. For this unholy head, that which I doth maketh unto thee. And in addition to weed eyes, Suzanne's now going to have some fog eyebrows, because why wouldn't she? Yeah, basically you're just painting wherever you want the fog to hover, and then once you press Finish Painting, it will all manifest, it will all immediately be renderable and ready to go. Okay, so we're done with that. So all we do is like painting with any other material type, we press Finish Painting. And immediately, as soon as we do, you'll notice the timeline starts to play and you'll begin to see this fog manifest over the areas that you painted. And of course, we can adjust the resolution of this by clicking on the Alchemy Adjust button, which gives us access to the most relevant parts of our materials on the object. So we could increase the detail by increasing this value. We can also bake these smoke effects, but you don't have to. They'll be immediately renderable as soon as you either press Use to add them to the whole object via the library, or you paint with them. You can also actually add things like fog and smoke and fire to mesh selection. So if I were to press tab to go into edit mode and select some of these faces and then press use, I can actually add that, whether it's fire or smoke or whatever, to just like specific parts of the mesh too, which is super cool. So one thing to remember when you are using fog or smoke or fire or whatever is that all those effects have to live in what's called this domain box. So anything that's using them, so we could paint a bunch of different stuff that was using fog or smoke or whatever, but they all have to exist within this box. So you either need to scale this box out to fit everything inside that you want to use those effects, or you need to just get everything, position it within it. So, either way. Also, as small as you can get this box around the areas where you're using an effect is good, because it will render faster and give you more quality even without increasing this value here. We can also control the thickness of like smoke, fog, or fire directly from the Alchemy adjust menu too, so if you want to do that. And of course, as soon as you adjust this domain box, you're going to need to either bake the effects again, or just press back to the end of the animation and press play and let it generate again. So the smaller I can get this domain box around the areas where the effects are without cutting them off, the faster it will render and the better quality it will be. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and close my library up here because I'm done adding materials and stuff. And I want to do a test render here, but before I do that, I think in my Environments tab from the drag and drop Environments add-on, I'm going to drop the saturation of this sky a little bit, maybe a bit more. And let's see, what else? I think if you have Sensei Format, you can just select Use Transparent here, which will make whatever you render have a transparent background and automatically set it up so you could save it as like a transparent PNG or something. Because what I'm going to do is render this for like the graphic probably of the YouTube video that you're watching. Weird time stuff. And we'll just kind of like zoom in on here and see what this is looking like when it renders. So I'm going to, how many samples? Let's do maybe 50 just to get an idea what this is going to look like, and press render here. Okay, looking pretty sweet here. One thing I forgot was that I had increased the dicing scale of this Suzanne head here. So if I click on it and press adjust, I had increased that to, if I click on the raise material, I'd increased that to 3. So I need to lower that back to 1 so it will actually render the detail out and not be like it is right now. If I switch back to 3D view, just press go back here in Sensei Format. I probably blew this texture scale a little bit too big, so I can shrink that back down a bit like that, and press hide there because I don't need to see that, and switch back to the image editor. I think I would like to increase the thickness of the fog. That's one thing, and I'm probably going to increase its quality too and then bake it. And the point of baking stuff like the fire or smoke or whatever is that right now you can see all the fog around the head, but if I were to save this and then open it back up, the fog would be gone until I'd press back and press play again. But if you bake it, then it will be there no matter what frame you click on after you reload the file, which is good. I think I'm going to just click on my library and turn on particle painting and then select one of the particles I was painting with and press the paintbrush button. This will take me back to paint mode, and you can see I can select from adjusting either weeds, clover, or smoke. I want to make the smoke a little more intense. Areas where I painted it, and I think I'm done with that. Press finish painting, and also, oh yeah, that immediately begins to, as soon as you press finish painting, it will immediately begin to spawn the effects. So you can render them right away. Also, if I click on the domain box here, I can adjust the thickness of the smoke here. So I would like to probably increase that by a factor of 3. So maybe 0.6 from 0.2, which is what it was. And I'll probably bake this detail at like 128. And let's see, what else? Oh yeah, I noticed that the weeds were looking pretty skimpy when I rendered it out because I had like lowered their total parent amount to 50 from like, I don't know, it was like 250. So probably increase that up to 125 and press hide there. And what else did I want to change? Yeah, I think I wanted to not have quite so much water on there, so it looks like, you know, some areas are like land masses. So probably turn the particle painting off so I can press the paintbrush button, which will take me back to the material painting aspect of this thing. And I can hold shift and get rid of quite so much of this water here. You know what, now that I think about it, it would have made a lot more sense to lay down. I mean, I told you like 5 minutes after I made the video, I'd figure out a way to do it that wasn't stupid, because like, you know, I was like constantly like finishing painting and then pressing the paintbrush again to see where I wanted to place the weeds, because in weight paint mode, you can't see the material of the object. Obviously, had I just, you know, decided where I wanted the weeds and stuff first and then put the water, I could be doing what I'm doing now, which would make a lot more sense. But, you know, you're always going to run into accidentally doing stupid stuff in 3D because, you know, whatever. But we can clear up these areas and it be a bit more like water masses, which I think will be cool. So I think that's going to about do it. I'm going to render this out so I've got a nice cool image to use for the YouTube thumbnail. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and do check out the Alchemy Material Library add-on, and you can download the user manual for free, learn more cool stuff it can do. You can also get this free open source pack library. You can download that free, even if you don't have the add-on on the documentation page. And a real huge feature about this add-on is that not only does the Alchemy base pack here we're using come with particle materials and alchemy effect materials, but you can actually create and save your own particle materials as well as alchemy effect materials like these true displacement raise AE materials. And to learn how to do that, you can check out the manual or other videos in this playlist. You also have the ability in the system options under the Manage tab to actually import and export these custom alchemy libraries. So say you created a bunch of your own particle materials and raise AE materials and your own smoke and fire materials, what have you. So maybe you've got like a green fire or a crazy smoke or something like that. You can import and export the individual libraries and all their assets to a single file, and then share, redistribute your libraries with other Alchemy users, even sell your own material packs to other people who have purchased the Alchemy Material Library add-on. So there's really a lot you can do with this thing. I'm really excited about it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. So thanks for watching and see you next time.